The stage lights glowed warmly as the crowd buzzed with curiosity. Everyone expected another flashy performance, maybe a dance crew or a pop singer. But when an elderly Filipino man slowly walked onto the America's Got Talent stage holding the hand of a small boy, the entire room fell silent. The little boy couldn't have been older than 10, and his shy smile instantly melted the judges' hearts. The old man wore a neatly pressed barong Tagalog, his eyes kind but filled with emotion. Simon Cowell leaned forward with curiosity and asked gently, "What's your story?" The boy looked up at his grandfather and then back at the judges. "He's my Lolo," he said softly. "We sing together." The audience let out an "ah," and the grandpa gave his grandson's hand a reassuring squeeze. When the music started, a calm hush blanketed the theater. It was a traditional Filipino folk song, slow and soulful, a tune that spoke of love, memory, and home. The young boy began to sing first, his pure voice echoing through the hall like a whisper of innocence. Then, his grandfather joined in, his tone deep, textured, and full of life experience. The contrast was magical, two generations blending together, carrying a song older than both of them. The crowd listened without breathing, captivated by their harmony. The camera panned across the judges' table. Sofia Vergara had her hand over her heart, Heidi Klum was smiling softly, and even Simon Cowell's eyes seemed to glisten. When the final note faded, there was a brief moment of silence before the entire theater exploded into applause. People stood up, cheering, clapping, shouting, "Bravo!" as the duo held hands tightly. Simon finally spoke, his voice slightly shaky. "That," he said, "was one of the most beautiful moments we've ever had on this stage." The boy covered his face, overwhelmed, and his grandpa pulled him close. It wasn't just a performance, it was a bond, a story, and a message of love that reached everyone who watched. That night, their audition video went viral, spreading across social media with millions of views in hours. The world had just met the most heartwarming duo in AGT history. The next time they stepped on stage, the audience already recognized them. The grandpa and grandson had become an overnight sensation, representing the heart and soul of Filipino culture. News outlets called them the voice of family, and clips of them laughing together backstage filled TV screens everywhere. The judges couldn't wait to see what they'd do next. This time, it was the Judge Cuts round, a tougher stage with higher stakes. The boy looked nervous, clutching his grandpa's arm, but his Lolo whispered something in Tagalog, a promise that everything would be okay. They chose a new song, another Filipino classic, this one about legacy and love between generations. When the first strum of the guitar filled the air, the crowd once again went completely still. The boy began softly, and then his grandpa joined him, their voices weaving like a prayer. The lyrics spoke of remembering where you came from, of passing stories and dreams to the next generation. By the time they reached the chorus, tears were streaming down faces in the audience. Simon leaned back, visibly emotional, and for a moment, even he seemed speechless. As the last note faded, the crowd erupted into cheers. Sophia whispered, "That's pure love," and Simon finally pressed the golden buzzer. Gold confetti rained down like a shower of stars. The little boy cried out in disbelief while his grandpa hugged him tightly, both of them shaking with joy. The audience rose again, chanting, clapping, and wiping away tears. Simon stood up, walked to the stage, and said quietly, "You two remind us why we do this show. You make the world stop and listen." That single moment became one of the most emotional in AGT history. The golden confetti sparkled in their hair as the crowd cheered them on, chanting their names. The boy whispered, "Thank you," into the microphone, his voice breaking, and his grandpa smiled proudly, eyes filled with gratitude. The performance wasn't just about singing, it was about connection, heritage, and the power of love that bridges generations. The night ended with one of the longest standing ovations ever seen on the show, and everyone watching knew this was only the beginning of something truly special. The night of the semifinals arrived, and the air inside the AGT studio was electric. The grandpa and grandson duo walked onto the stage hand in hand, wearing matching black outfits with subtle Filipino embroidery. The crowd roared the moment they appeared, holding up signs that read, "Lolo and Apo forever," and, "From the Philippines to the world." The boy looked around in awe, taking in the sea of faces and flashing lights. His grandpa squeezed his shoulder gently and whispered, "Just look at me, and sing from your heart." When the lights dimmed and the music began, a hush swept over the entire room. This time, they had decided to take a risk, to blend a Filipino lullaby with a modern English ballad. It was a bold choice, one that could either move people deeply or fall flat. The guitar chords began softly, echoing through the air like a heartbeat. The boy sang the first few lines in English, his voice trembling slightly but filled with emotion. Then, his grandpa joined in with the Filipino lyrics, their voices merging into something truly magical. The harmony felt like a bridge between two worlds, old and new, past and present. The boy hit a high note with pure clarity, and the grandpa followed with a deep tone that grounded the song like the earth itself. The audience sat completely still, many holding their phones up, recording the moment as if afraid to forget it. When the music reached its peak, the grandpa stopped playing for a moment and let his grandson's voice soar on its own. The crowd erupted in cheers, then quieted again as he softly strummed the final chords. The ending note lingered in the air, filled with the kind of silence that only comes after something extraordinary. The judges stood up instantly. Howie Mandel clapped with wide eyes, Sophia whispered, "Incredible," and Heidi looked emotional. Simon leaned into his microphone and said, "You two just turned a simple song into a masterpiece. That was not just music, that was storytelling, that was soul." The audience cheered as Simon's words echoed across the theater. The boy smiled shyly, hiding behind his grandpa, and the older man gave a small bow. That night, their performance video went viral again, reaching millions of views within hours. People around the world shared it, writing messages about how the song made them miss their grandparents, their families, and their homeland. The duo had become more than contestants, they had become symbols of love and connection. As the competition grew tougher, so did the emotions behind their performances. By the time they reached the next round, fame had begun to weigh on them. The pressure to keep touching hearts was immense. Everywhere they went, people wanted photos, interviews, and emotional stories. The boy loved it, but his grandpa had begun to slow down. He coughed more often and needed to sit between rehearsals. The boy would hand him water and look worried, but the grandpa would smile, saying, "Don't worry about me, Apo. We're here because of love." During their final rehearsal, the boy couldn't hide his concern. "Lolo, what if you're too tired to sing tonight?" he asked softly. His grandpa smiled and replied, "No matter what happens, we'll sing from our hearts. That's what we promised." That night, they walked on stage again, greeted by thunderous applause. The judges and audience had grown attached to them, and everyone could feel the emotion even before the first note. They performed a song about gratitude, one that spoke about life, sacrifice, and the beauty of growing old. The boy started to sing, his voice trembling with tears, while his grandpa's deep tone supported him like a gentle wave. When the grandpa's hands shook slightly on the guitar, the boy reached over and steadied them without missing a note. It was the kind of unscripted moment that broke everyone's heart. By the end of the performance, both were crying, but their voices never faltered. When the last note faded, the crowd stood up instantly. Many were wiping tears from their eyes. Simon looked down, visibly moved, and said softly, "That wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that's what makes it beautiful." The boy hugged his grandpa tightly as the audience cheered their names. They had just sung one of the most emotional songs in AGT history, and even though the grandpa looked exhausted, his eyes sparkled with pride. They had made it to the finals, not just as performers, but as living proof that love, music, and family could move the world. The night of the finals arrived with excitement and emotion filling the air. The grandpa and grandson duo were now one of the most beloved acts in AGT history. The cameras followed them backstage as the boy adjusted his grandpa's barong Tagalog and whispered, "We can do this, Lolo." The old man smiled and touched his grandson's cheek. "No matter what happens tonight, remember, this moment is already a dream come true." When they stepped onto the stage, the crowd roared louder than ever before. Signs with their names, Filipino flags, and messages of love filled the arena. The judges stood to welcome them, already knowing this performance would be special. The lights dimmed, and the stage glowed like a sunrise. The first notes of their song echoed softly, an original medley titled, "Home is Where You Are." The melody began with the gentle sound of an acoustic guitar, played by the grandpa with a tenderness that made the whole room still. The boy started singing the English verses about missing home and finding love in family, his voice clear and filled with maturity far beyond his years. Then, the grandpa joined in, singing the Filipino lyrics, his voice deep and textured like time itself. Together they created a harmony that felt like a bridge between generations and languages. The boy looked up at his grandpa as they sang, and the old man smiled with pride, eyes glistening under the stage lights. The music swelled as the background screen displayed images of home, mountains, fields, children laughing, and families together. As they reached the chorus, the crowd began to clap in rhythm. The judges were emotional. Heidi wiped tears from her eyes, Sophia whispered, "This is love," and Simon sat completely still, watching with a soft expression rarely seen from him. When the final note rang out, the boy took a deep breath and turned toward his grandpa. The old man, voice trembling, spoke softly into the microphone, "For every grandparent and grandchild, never stop believing in love and music." The crowd exploded into applause. Simon stood and clapped slowly, visibly touched. "I don't think we've ever had something this beautiful on this show," he said. "You didn't just sing, you shared your souls." The confetti rained again, not gold this time but white, floating like feathers as the boy and his grandpa hugged tightly. It was a moment of pure emotion, one that would live forever in AGT history. When the votes were counted later that night, they didn't win the grand prize, but it didn't matter. The audience chanted their names as they walked off the stage, holding hands and smiling through tears. Simon came backstage to congratulate them personally, saying, "You two already won the world tonight." The grandpa nodded humbly and said, "We just wanted to share love, sir. That's all." Weeks later, their lives had completely changed. Though they didn't take home the trophy, they had become international icons. Invitations poured in from around the world, talk shows, charities, concerts, and cultural events. They performed on morning TV shows and appeared in magazines. The boy, now more confident than ever, spoke in interviews about how his Lolo taught him that music is not about fame but about heart. Their bond inspired millions, especially families separated by distance. Months passed, and their journey took them to a global unity concert where they represented the Philippines. The stage was massive, filled with artists from every corner of the world. When their turn came, the boy stood alone under the spotlight, holding his guitar. The crowd cheered as he said, "Tonight, I sing for my Lolo." The grandpa had grown too weak to perform that evening, but he sat proudly backstage, tears in his eyes, watching his grandson carry their legacy forward. The boy sang the song they had written together, his voice trembling with emotion. As he reached the final line, he pointed to the sky and whispered, "This is for you." The arena fell silent, then erupted in thunderous applause. The cameras caught the grandpa smiling proudly, hand over his heart. The world had witnessed the growth of a boy who learned love through song and a man who showed that music never ages. In the final montage of their journey, scenes flashed of their first audition, the golden buzzer moment, and their emotional performances. Simon's final words from the finale echoed over the clips, "You don't need to win to become unforgettable." Their story became a reminder that sometimes the greatest prize isn't a trophy, it's the hearts you touch along the way.